Stop waiting to be chosen. I need you to hear that before anything else because the waiting has been going on too long and it is costing you something that is too valuable to keep losing. You have been standing in a posture of waiting for a long time. Waiting for someone to see you and decide you are worth pursuing. Waiting for the group to make room for you and make it obvious that you belong. Waiting for the person to finally say, I choose you, and mean it with their actions, not just their words. Waiting for the opportunity to pick you over someone else. Waiting for the recognition that says, yes, what you bring is valuable, and we want it here. And the waiting has stretched on long enough that it has started to feel like a verdict. Like the fact that you are still waiting is the answer. Like the continued absence of being chosen is proof of something true about your worth. I am here today to tell you that the conclusion you have been drawing from the waiting is wrong. And I am going to tell you why. Before any human being ever had the opportunity to choose you or reject you, I already made my decision. I chose you before the foundation of the world was laid. I chose you before your parents made any decision about your life. I chose you before the friend group that left you out, and before the person who did not pick you, and before the opportunity that went to someone else, and before every moment of not being selected that accumulated into the quiet wound you carry now. My choice of you was not dependent on your performance or your appearance or your personality or your background or your track record or anything else that human choices tend to depend on. I chose you because I wanted you. Specifically, deliberately, completely, and that choice has never been reconsidered. I want to talk about where the waiting started because it did not begin in your adult life. It began earlier. There was a moment or a series of moments when you were young enough that being chosen felt like a survival question rather than just a preference. A moment when the kids picked teams and you were one of the last. A moment when the invitation went to everyone else and not to you. A moment when you look to a parent for the specific kind of choosing that says you are my favorite part of my day, and it did not come the way you needed it to come. A moment when someone whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's at that particular time made it clear through their choices that you were not their priority. And something in you learned in that moment that being chosen required something you apparently had not yet figured out how to be. And the project of figuring out what that something was has been running in the background of your relational life ever since. I want to speak to what that project looks like in your daily life right now. The way you pay careful attention to how people respond to you in group settings to determine whether you are being chosen or being tolerated. The way you scan conversations for signs of genuine interest versus polite inclusion. The way you hold back slightly in new relationships to avoid the exposure of needing to be chosen and then being left waiting. The way you sometimes overfunction in relationships trying to make yourself indispensable, so that being chosen becomes the logical conclusion rather than something that requires someone to voluntarily prefer you for no reason. The way you track who initiates contact and who does not, and what the ratio means about your standing with that person. All of this careful monitoring takes enormous energy. And all of it is running in service of trying to determine whether the choosing has happened or whether you are still waiting. I want to speak to the specific pain of not being chosen by someone you chose fully. You went all in on a friendship or a relationship or a community, and you made yourself available, and you showed up consistently, and you invested genuinely, and you hoped that the investment would be returned with a clear, unambiguous choosing on their part. And instead, you got something partial. Something that felt more like you were useful to them than truly wanted by them. Something that made you feel included when it was convenient for them and overlooked when it was not. That specific pain of choosing someone who did not choose you back at the same level is one of the most quietly devastating experiences a person can have because it does not announce itself dramatically. It arrives slowly through the accumulation of small signals. And when it finally becomes undeniable, the grief of it is complicated by the question of whether you misread the situation, or whether the situation genuinely changed, or whether the other person ever intended what you hoped they intended. I want to speak to what happens in your body when you receive a signal that you might not be chosen, when the text goes unanswered too long and the worry begins. When you are talking to someone and you notice their attention drift and you feel the familiar drop in your stomach. When you see a photo of a gathering you were not invited to, and the feeling that lands in your chest is not simple disappointment, but the older and heavier feeling of not being wanted. Your body has learned to respond to those signals with something closer to a survival response than a simple social disappointment, because somewhere in your history, not being chosen became associated with something more threatening than just missing out on a particular gathering. The body remembers that association even when the conscious mind knows that missing this specific invitation is not actually dangerous. I want to speak to those of you who have responded to the wound of not being chosen by becoming the most useful person in every room, who learned early that usefulness generates proximity even when genuine wanting does not. And so you became the one who helps, and the one who shows up, and the one who does the things other people do not want to do, and the one who makes yourself available, and the one who remembers everyone else's needs, while hoping that the proximity generated by your usefulness will eventually convert into genuine choosing. It is an understandable strategy. It works at the surface level. People keep you around because you are valuable to them. But deep down you know the difference between being kept around because you are useful and being chosen because you are genuinely wanted. And the difference produces a loneliness that the busy usefulness cannot fill, because the loneliness is specifically about the wanting, and the usefulness does not produce that. I want to speak to those of you who have become very good at making other people feel chosen, while quietly wondering if anyone will ever do the same for you. You are the one who sends the thoughtful message. You are the one who notices when someone has gone quiet and checks in. You are the one who shows up to the things that matter to other people even when attendance is not expected. You are the one who says the thing that makes the person feel seen and valued. You have a gift for choosing people, and you exercise it genuinely, and the people you do this for are better for it. But in the private space, you wonder when it is going to be your turn, when someone is going to show up for you the way you show up for others, when the initiating and the noticing and the choosing is going to move in your direction. That wondering is legitimate. The desire to be chosen is not neediness. It is the honest expression of a need that I built into you by design. I want to speak to those of you who have interpreted seasons of relational difficulty as evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you, who have concluded based on the pattern of not being chosen that the pattern is trying to tell you something about your inherent lovability, that the people who did not choose you were responding to something real and true about your core self, rather than revealing something about their own limitations or about the specific chemistry of those specific relationships. I want to dismantle that conclusion directly. The pattern of not being chosen says nothing definitive about your lovability. It says something about the specific people in specific contexts and about the wounds that may be shaping which relationships you have been drawn toward. But the deepest truth about your lovability is not located in the history of who chose you and who did not. It is located in something more fundamental than any human choice. It is located in the fact that I made you, and what I make I consider worth having. Without reservation, I want to speak to the way the wound of not being chosen affects how you interpret kindness when it comes. When someone does show genuine interest and genuine choosing, it can be difficult to receive it fully. Because the pattern has taught you that choosing is not always what it appears to be, and that what looks like choosing can be withdrawn, and that allowing yourself to fully receive someone's choosing before you have tested its durability is a risk that has produced pain before. So you hold back slightly even from the good things. You receive the choosing at a partial level because full reception feels too exposed. And then sometimes you wonder whether your partial reception communicates something to the other person that causes them to pull back, which seems to confirm the fear that produces the partial reception in the first place. This cycle is worth naming because the naming is the first step toward interrupting it. I want to speak to what it would mean to actually believe that you have already been chosen, not as a concept, not as a theological statement that you affirm intellectually, but as a lived reality that changes how you enter rooms and how you receive people and how you interpret silence and how you respond to the ambiguous signals that currently trigger the waiting posture. What would be different if the question of whether you are chosen was already settled? You would still want human connection and human affirmation and human choosing because those are real needs I designed into you. But the wanting would not carry the weight of a survival question. It would be a genuine desire for something good rather than a desperate seeking of something necessary. The difference between those two postures is enormous. I want to speak to those of you who have been waiting to be chosen in a specific relationship right now. A friendship that feels imbalanced. A romantic interest that has not moved toward you in the way you have moved toward them. A family relationship where you have never quite felt like you were the one they were most delighted by. A work environment where you feel like you have not been fully seen or selected for the opportunities you know you are capable of. The specific waiting in each of those contexts is real, and I am not dismissing it as insignificant. But I want to offer you something alongside the waiting. I want to offer you the question of what it would look like to show up in those situations, not from the posture of needing to be chosen, but from the posture of someone who already knows they are wanted by the most important source. That shift in posture does not eliminate the desire for those specific relationships to develop, but it changes the quality of how you are present in them, and that change in presence often changes how people in those situations respond. I want to speak to those of you who have stopped putting yourself forward because the experience of not being chosen has become too costly. You had the dream and you went for it, and it did not select you, and the not being selected stung enough that you pulled back from future risk. You made yourself available for the friendship, and it did not develop into what you hoped, and the disappointment calibrated you toward less availability next time. You tried to belong to the community, and it did not fully embrace you, and now you are more careful about how much belonging you reach for. I understand every one of those recalibrations. They are the heart's attempt to protect itself from repeated pain. But I want to gently point out that the protection has also become isolation. The pulling back that was meant to prevent future hurt has also prevented future good things from arriving. The recalibration has gone past a healthy update of your discernment and into a withholding of yourself that is costing you the very connection you still genuinely want. I want to speak to those of you who feel ready to be chosen in a specific area of your life, who are not hiding and not withholding, but who are genuinely present and available and still waiting. You are doing everything that you believe you should be doing, and the choosing still has not arrived in the specific form you are hoping for. For you, I want to say something about timing rather than about effort. You cannot manufacture the choosing of the right people through the right amount of effort. Some of what you are waiting for is being prepared on the other side of the waiting. The friendship that will genuinely choose you is being made ready for the meeting. The opportunity that will select you is being shaped for the season. The relationship that will finally feel like mutual choosing is not absent because you have not tried hard enough. It is still coming. And the waiting is not evidence of rejection. It is the gap between where you are and where the meeting point is. I want to speak to the difference between being chosen by many people superficially and being chosen by the right people deeply. The wound of not being chosen often drives people toward an unconscious strategy of trying to make themselves chosen by as many people as possible as a hedge, against the pain of not being chosen by the specific ones who matter. But the breadth of shallow choosing cannot fill the specific ache of genuine deep choosing. What you actually need is not 100 people who know your name and consider you pleasant. What you need is a small number of people who know your actual self and choose that. And that kind of choosing takes longer to find and requires more vulnerability to receive. But it is what the ache is actually pointing toward, not popularity, genuine mutual choosing. I want to speak to how you treat yourself in the middle of the waiting. Because the way you choose yourself in the seasons when others are slow to choose you matters enormously. Do you speak to yourself with the same kindness you would offer to someone you love who was walking through the same difficulty? Do you allow yourself the things that bring you genuine joy without needing someone else to validate those things first? Do you invest in your own growth and your own well-being and your own development as if you are someone whose development matters? The practice of choosing yourself is not a replacement for the genuine connection you are longing for, but it is the maintenance of your own dignity in the waiting, and it is the building of a foundation that the right connections will eventually be built on. And it is also the honest practice of what you are asking others to do. Choosing yourself demonstrates that you believe you are someone worth choosing, and that belief radiates outward in ways that eventually draw in the people who are capable of recognizing it. I want to leave you with this. The most significant choosing that has ever been made about you was made before any human being had the opportunity to weigh in, before any group decided whether you were in or out, before any person decided whether you were worth pursuing. before any audition or application or interview or relationship gave another human being the chance to evaluate you. I made my decision. I chose you. I named you as mine. I declared you worth everything it would cost me to have you. And that declaration was not a casual one. It was the most costly choosing in history, and I made it about you specifically. You are not waiting for your worth to be confirmed by the right number of human choosings. Your worth was confirmed before the world began. What you are waiting for are the specific human connections that are still coming, and that will come in the right time, and that will feel different from the ones that did not choose you, because they will be the right people choosing the right version of you at the right time. Stop waiting to find out if you are worth being chosen. You already know the answer to that question. The answer is yes. It was always yes. And the humans who have not yet figured that out are simply behind the pace of what I already know about you. You are chosen, my child, completely, already, and always. Let that be the ground you stand on while you wait for the human connections to catch up to what I have already decided. I want to keep speaking, because I know the things I have said have touched something real in you, and I do not want to leave before reaching the rest of what needed to be said today. I want to speak to the specific version of not being chosen that happens in the workplace or in the spaces where your gifts and contributions are evaluated. The project that went to someone else. The promotion that did not come even though you deserved it by every metric that seemed to matter. The idea you presented that got received flatly and then credited to someone else 3 months later. The effort and the skill and the consistent presence that was simply not selected for the recognition it earned. Being overlooked professionally when you know you are capable and deserving produces its own specific kind of wound, because professional environments often feel like the most objective context for being chosen. If the choosing were based on merit, you should have been selected. And when you are not, the conclusion can feel even more final than social rejection, because the logic was supposed to be on your side. I want to address that wound directly. Your professional non-selection does not reflect your actual capability or your actual value any more than social non-selection reflects your actual worth as a person. Professional environments are shaped by biases and internal politics and timing, and the specific chemistry between decision makers and candidates, and 100 other factors that have nothing to do with the objective measurement of who was most qualified. The person who was chosen over you may have had a specific relationship that you did not have, or may have been in a specific category that was being prioritized for reasons that had nothing to do with the work itself, or may have simply been visible in a moment when you were not. None of that is a verdict on your capability. Let me speak clearly about your capability. I put it in you. I know exactly what it is, and I know exactly what it is for, and I am not finished creating the context in which it will be seen and used and honored appropriately. I want to speak to those of you who have internalized the non-choosing to the degree that you have stopped putting yourself forward for things you are genuinely qualified for, where the fear of not being chosen has become a reason to preemptively remove yourself from consideration. You do not apply for the position because you have already decided you will not be selected. You do not speak up in the room because you have already calculated that your contribution will not be the one that lands. You do not make yourself visible in contexts where visibility would be appropriate because the memory of being visible and then not chosen is still recent enough to make invisibility feel safer. I want to challenge that calculation. Preemptive withdrawal is not protection. It is the self-imposition of the outcome you were afraid of. The job you did not apply for certainly did not choose you. The contribution you did not offer certainly did not get recognized. The safety of not being rejected is also the certainty of not being selected. And I have things for you that require your presence and your offering in order to arrive. I want to speak to the relationship between being chosen and feeling like you belong. For many of you, the deeper longing beneath the desire to be chosen is the longing to belong. To have a place where your presence is expected, and your absence is noticed, and your contribution is woven into the fabric of the community in a way that makes you genuinely part of it. Belonging is different from being tolerated. It is different from being included out of courtesy or social obligation. Real belonging is the experience of being specifically wanted in a specific place. And it is one of the most fundamental human needs because it speaks to something about how we were designed. I made you for community. I made you for belonging. The ache for it is not a character flaw. It is the appropriate response of a person who was made for something that they have not yet fully found. I want to speak to those of you who found belonging in a specific community and then lost it, who had the experience of being truly chosen and truly belonging somewhere, and then watched that belonging end through circumstances or conflict or simply the natural movement of seasons. The loss of genuine belonging is one of the more disorienting losses a person can experience, because it gives you the reference point of what the real thing feels like, and then removes it. And navigating toward belonging again after having had it, and lost it is harder in some ways than looking for it when you have never found it, because now you know exactly what you are missing, and the gap between what you had, and what you currently have is a specific and named thing rather than a vague longing. I want to speak to those of you who feel that the choosing has always been conditional, that the people who have chosen you in your life have done so based on what you could offer rather than simply on who you are. Parents whose choosing felt tied to your performance. Friends whose closeness seemed to rise and fall with how useful you were to them. Partners whose choosing felt contingent on you being a particular version of yourself that required ongoing maintenance. The exhaustion of conditional choosing is real because it means you can never stop earning what should simply be given. And the constant earning is both exhausting and ultimately unsatisfying, because something in you knows that what is earned through performance is not the same as what is given simply because you are wanted. I want to speak to what unconditional choosing actually feels like, because I am not sure you have experienced it enough to have a clear reference point. Unconditional choosing feels like the freedom to show up imperfectly without the fear that the imperfection will prompt a reconsideration of the choosing. It feels like being able to change and grow without worrying that the change will make you less chosen than you were before. It feels like having your low moments witnessed by someone whose affection does not decrease in response to them. It feels like being able to take up space without calculating whether the space you are taking is more than your choosing entitles you to. I want to be that for you. I want to be the reference point for what unconditional choosing actually feels like so that you have something real to build from. I want to speak to the fear of being chosen and then abandoned. Because for some of you, the issue is not that you have never been chosen. It is that you have been chosen and then had the choosing withdrawn. And that specific sequence of events has produced a fear of being chosen again. Because if being chosen is temporary, then perhaps not being chosen is safer. The choosing and then unchoosing is one of the most painful experiences in the relational catalog, because it requires you to grieve not only the loss of the relationship, but the loss of the security you thought the choosing represented. If I am chosen today, and that choosing can be withdrawn tomorrow, then what does any choosing actually mean? I want to address that fear by distinguishing my choosing from human choosing. Human choosing is subject to change because humans are subject to change and their capacity for sustained commitment varies, and their circumstances shift in ways that affect their choices. My choosing is not subject to that variability. I chose you, and the choosing is permanent. It does not depend on your performance sustaining a certain level. It does not depend on you remaining the same person you were when I chose you. It does not have an expiration date or a renewal requirement. It simply is, and it will remain. I want to speak to the day that is ahead of you. The interactions and the spaces and the people that will give you opportunities to either show up from the posture of waiting to be chosen or from the posture of someone who already knows they are chosen and is simply present and genuine and available for the connections that are right for this season. You cannot control whether the people in those spaces choose you in the ways you hope, but you can control whether you enter those spaces as someone auditioning for worth or as someone who already carries their worth with them. That difference changes everything about how you move and how you speak, and how you receive the responses that come, and how you interpret the ambiguous signals that previously would have triggered the familiar waiting anxiety. I want you to try something. The next room you walk into, I want you to walk into it as if the question of your worth and your lovability has already been settled. Not with arrogance, not with a performance of confidence you do not actually feel, but with the quiet inner knowledge that you do not have to earn the right to be there. You belong wherever I have placed you. The choosing is done. What is left is simply showing up and being present and letting the genuine connections that are meant to form find their way to you while you are no longer scanning the room for evidence of whether you are wanted. Here is what I want you to carry with you. Every single moment of not being chosen by a specific person or a specific group was not a verdict about your worth. It was information about fit, and about timing, and about the specific chemistry between you and that specific context. And it was also sometimes simply the wrong people in the wrong season not yet ready to recognize what they were encountering. Their not choosing does not make you unchosen. It makes you available for the right choosing when it arrives. You were chosen before the world began. You are chosen today. You will be chosen tomorrow and in every day that follows. That choosing is the most permanent and most unconditional thing that exists in your story. Build on it. Let it hold you. Let it be the thing you return to when the human choosing feels slow, or absent, or ambiguous. And then watch what happens to your presence in the world when the question of your worth stops being the question you are always secretly trying to answer. Watch what opens up when the energy that was going into waiting to be chosen gets freed up for simply being who you already are. You are chosen, my child. Walk in it today. Let me speak to a few more things before we close, because there is still ground to cover, and I want to reach all of it. I want to speak to those of you who are raising children while carrying the wound of not being chosen, who are trying to give your children the experience of being fully wanted and fully chosen, while privately carrying the memory of how it felt not to receive that yourself. There is a particular kind of grief that surfaces in parenting when you are offering your child what you yourself never had or did not have enough of. The love you pour into your child is real, and it is beautiful, and it is also sometimes complicated by the emotion of recognizing in their small face the child you once were who also needed exactly this, and did not always receive it. I want to say something to you about that grief. It is allowed to exist alongside the joy of parenting. The grief does not diminish the quality of what you are giving your child. And the healing of your own wound around being chosen is something I want to be part of, not only for your sake, but because the more settled you are in your own experience of being chosen, the more effortlessly you will be able to transmit that sense of being fully wanted to the people you are raising. I want to speak to those of you who have confused being chosen with being worthy, as if the choosing is the thing that creates the worth, rather than the worth being the thing that precedes the choosing. Worth is not conferred by being chosen. It is recognized by being chosen. The worth is already there. What the choosing does is acknowledge what was already real. When someone fails to choose you, they are not removing worth that was previously present. They are simply failing to recognize what is there. And their failure of recognition does not alter the actual reality of what they failed to see. You are not less valuable because someone did not perceive your value. You are simply underestimated by that particular person in that particular moment, and underestimation by others has never been the accurate measure of actual worth. I want to speak to those of you who are in a season of being genuinely chosen well by good people, and who are still struggling to fully receive it, who have found something real and healthy and mutual, and who are now discovering that the wounds from previous not being chosen are making it difficult to simply be present in the good thing that is happening. The hypervigilance that was useful in contexts where choosing was unreliable is now applying itself to a context where it is not needed, and in doing so it is creating interference in the very connection you have been wanting. This is one of the more frustrating aspects of relational healing. The tools that protected you in difficult seasons can become obstacles in good seasons. The work of healing is in part the work of learning to let the tools rest when the season has changed. I am with you in that specific work. It is harder than it sounds, and it takes longer than you wish it did, and I am patient with the process. I want to speak to the specific longing of those of you who have never experienced what it feels like to be someone's first choice. To be the person that someone immediately thinks of when they have good news, or want company, or need help. To be at the top of someone's list without working for the position. To be chosen not because you made yourself useful enough, but simply because someone woke up and thought of you first. That specific experience of being a first thought rather than an afterthought is something you have been quietly longing for without always having words for it. I want you to know that I think of you first. Before my attention goes anywhere else, I am already with you. Before you have done anything to earn consideration on this particular day, I have already thought of you. That is not a figure of speech. You are on my mind constantly, and with an attention and an affection that does not have to be divided among everything else the way human attention does. You are known and held and thought of in a way that no human relationship can fully replicate because no human relationship operates from a place of unlimited attention. Mine does. And you are one of the ones I am attending to with all of it. I want to speak to the connection between being chosen and being willing to be known. You cannot be genuinely chosen if you are not genuinely known, because what gets chosen when you are hidden is the performance rather than the person. And being chosen for a performance you can only sustain indefinitely at great cost is not the same as being chosen for who you actually are. The risk of being genuinely known is the risk that the real version of you will not be chosen. But the reward of being genuinely known and then chosen is the only form of being chosen that actually reaches the place in you that is hungry for it. Let people know you. Not all people, not all at once. But incrementally and with discernment, let the real version of you become visible to the ones who have demonstrated they are safe to know it. And then let them have the opportunity to make an informed choice about whether they want the real version. You may be surprised by what they choose. I want to leave you with one final image. Imagine the moment before anything was created. The moment when I looked at the space where your life would eventually unfold and I made my decision about you. Not based on what you would accomplish, not based on how you would perform, not based on what you would contribute to the story I was building, based simply on the fact that I wanted you in the story. That you were someone I wanted to know and to be known by and to walk with and to love. That decision was made about you with full knowledge of everything your life would contain. Every struggle and every failure and every beautiful moment and every hard season and every private tear and every moment of doubt. I saw all of it and I said, yes, I want this one, this specific one. I want them in my story. That decision is still in effect today. Nothing that has happened since then has prompted a reconsideration. You are still wanted in this story with the same completeness you were wanted in it before it began. And every person or opportunity or community that has not fully chosen you has simply been a part of the story that is not the final word about you. The final word was spoken before the story began, and it said you are chosen and loved and wanted and mine. Walk in that today, my child. Let it be the thing you know when everything else feels uncertain. You are chosen, you always were, and one more thing. The next time you feel the familiar pull of the waiting posture. The next time the old question rises up asking whether you are going to be chosen or left out again, I want you to have something ready to meet it with. Not a forced affirmation that you have to manufacture from nothing, but a memory, the memory of this moment. The moment where you were reminded that the most significant choosing in your entire story already happened, and it happened in your favor, and it cannot be undone. Let that memory be the answer to the question when the question comes. You are not waiting to find out if you are wanted. You already know, you have always been wanted, and the rest is just the story catching up to what was always already true about you. I am proud of you for still being here after everything that tried to convince you that you were not worth staying for. That alone tells me everything about who you are. Now go live like someone who already knows the answer to the question that has been driving you. Because you do know, you have always known, you just needed someone to remind you today.